Hello everybody, Stevie again. Welcome to my new video on effective sport coaching. Effective sport coaching steps to success. This is a book I've written predominantly about trying to give people the information, especially if you're involved in sport coaching, how you can become more effective in your role as a sports coach. Now, I'm going back to my own sort of passion, which was football, and I basically grew up in Liverpool in England, so I was obviously very well attuned to the game of football early on in my life, and it became quite a bit of a cultural backdrop to everything I thought about, and I used to eat, sleep and drink football, so and play football most of the time in the streets. I'm sure you've all got your own story to relate to there. But I come across this idea to look at, what was the thing that drove me to write a book about sport coaching. And I suppose if you've got your own experience, you've got your own sort of insights to what you think a good sports coach is, but also you might have even experienced a sports coach at some point in your life, whether it be junior development, whether it be when you're a teenager, when you're a grown adult. So I'll just give you a brief on that in a moment, but basically my story started back in 1966. Seems a long time ago now, but I suppose it's very timely with the latest World Cup in Russia, so I thought maybe this is good timing to bring this one to the forefront as well. But my story started in the World Cup in 1966 because I grew up in the street just right next to Everton's football ground, so I was well attuned to seeing a couple of the games live, which I was very excited about. Two players that stood out to me obviously were the best players in the world at that time were Pelé from Brazil and Eusebio from Portugal. But it wasn't just about those two players, it was also about the atmosphere and the people and the cultures all coming together and having a good time and bringing the world game to the streets and just a normal working class people. So that gave me a little bit of a bit of a move forward into the sport in general, and that's when I realised how powerful this sport was. But then I also started to go to certain games over the years, which I've been quite lucky to do so. And I went to one game in the European Cup final in Istanbul. Liverpool were taking on Inter Milan, AC Milan at the time, to hopefully win the European Cup. But I also was, as a youngster growing up, was often in touch with the great Bill Shankly, who was a man who coached Liverpool Football Club for many years, and he was the man that brought fame to the club because of his coaching ideas, his coaching philosophy and his coaching team. They were very, very well oiled as a group of people to come together and just start to be successful. But there was one thing that Mr. Shankly had, and he had this charisma, and I think people who know him quite well would also see that as well. And I started to, over the last few years, think about these types of coaches who have been very successful, but also trying to find out why they were so successful. If you look at the great Bill Shankly, I just basically was a newspaper boy, so I used to deliver newspapers to his house, and for a couple of years I got to know him very well, and I got to know his wife Nancy very well, or Nessie they call him in Scottish language. But the bottom line was things started to grow, and I studied sport management at university, and I got very interested in the coaching side of that, looking at different coaching models and why some coaches were very successful and why some weren't. So this book, Effective Sport Coaching Steps to Success, was a project I did for a few months, and I learned quite a lot in my research journey as well, to the point I just focused on three main coaches who were highly successful in their sports. One being the USA NBL basketball coach in the USA, a legend in the USA, Phil Jackson. The Olympic hockeyroos coach, Rick Charlesworth, who won the Olympic gold medal twice in a row. And then we have the English Premier League guru from Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson, who in himself won about 25, 26 trophies in the same amount of years, and also 13 league titles. So he was a person that I couldn't really ignore from this point of view of seeing what the traits were that successful coaches had. So I just want to ask you a question. Now you've got a bit of a brief what triggered me into this project. What if you are a coach at this present time, whether you coach juniors, you coach teenagers, you coach adults, you coach professionals, semi-professionals, amateurs, whatever you coach, and whatever sport you coach, I'm just maybe pop a question to you, because it's important you get a feel for it as well. Is that why do you think certain coaches become more successful than others? And maybe just dwell on that for a moment. Now, the reason I asked you that question is that we all have our own opinions, and we all have our own experiences, and we all have some good experiences and bad experiences. But there's often quite certain ingredients that always pop up when I was doing my research. It's like making a loaf of bread. You have to have certain ingredients to make the bread, something that's going to taste nice and something that people are willing to eat. But there's one ingredient in the bread, that's the yeast. If there's no yeast, the bread's not going to rise. And that's a similar thing to coaching. It's what's the ingredient that makes these coaches tick? What have they got that's basically something that other people don't have? Now, I know you could call it humility, and with Mr. Shankly, his trait was he was very, very much a people's person. He understood the power of relationships with people, and he also triggered a lot of that power into his own coaching style and his own coaching approach. And people loved him because of that, because he interfaced with the general people on the street, and he interfaced with people and their problems, and he also interfaced with the supporters on a regular basis. So he had something that was very special. Call it people skills, call it what you will, but he had some charisma, and he had that ingredient. Now, if you look at Alex Ferguson, he makes a certain quote which I thought was useful to start the video off on. He says, if you want to be a coach, he's saying if a coach doesn't have control, then he will not last. It's a very interesting quote. So if a coach does not have control, he will not last. That's very succinct. And I do tend to agree with that. My coaching, going back many years, was going through the ranks of juniors with my own children, into teenager level, into youth development, to semi-professional, and also to amateur as well. And I also ended up in the veterans, which is probably the spiral downwards, as they say, when you get older. But I picked up lots of things on the way. Lots of coaches I didn't like, lots of coaches I really did like. And you probably got your own ideas of what your experiences were, what made you want to be coached by certain people, what made you walk away from certain people in regards to the coaching style. So I want to concentrate on, it's not just about coaching, it's not just about winning, and it's not just about being successful or trying to fuel your ego. Basically, if coaching doesn't always mean you have to be a winner, and I think sometimes that's the problem with coaches. They depending on the level they're coaching, it's often geared around the fact they have to win everything, and it's not really about that. It's certainly not about that at youth development or junior level, but it's becoming that way because people are starting to realise that there's big money to be made, and lots of youngsters are obviously going through the mill of a young junior through to youth development, and they're lots of times being pressured not only by their parents but by coaches. I mean, I never had a coach until I was, I think, 16, 17. And he was the English national schools coach at that period of time, but he was a person I wasn't really very fond of, even though I was a free-spirited type player. I wanted to express myself. He was the type of person who wouldn't allow me to do that. So we had some conflict, emotional turmoil going on quite a lot of time, and I suppose that's one of the lessons I learned as well, is that you're going to try and, you know, fit the coach to what you're trying to achieve. And everyone's different, so it's important to get a feel for what coaching effectiveness is, because some coaches can be very, very effective and some coaches can be very, very ineffective. Okay, so what I want to talk about through this video is just give you a brief understanding what's in this book, and each video will be sort of sectioned off into certain chapters, so it gives you more insight. And as you go through the videos, you can learn something for yourself. And I learned something, and I think that's what it's all about. We're never the ultimate guru in regards to coaching, but there are certain things you really do need to know, and it can make a hell of a difference to whether you become effective or not. Okay, so if we look at a quotation here, which is one of the coaching consultants I looked at through my research, and what is coaching effectiveness? Because it's the effectiveness that's the important part. And it says the consistent application of integrated professional, interpersonal and intrapersonal knowledge to improve athletes' competence, their confidence, their connection and their character in specific sporting contexts. So what we've got to consider there is it's not just about winning or being successful with medals and achieving things on a personal basis. If you're an individual athlete, you know, you might be aspiring to Olympic Games or winning a gold medal. There's lots of more ingredients to the coaching style or the coaching of the person to get you to get to that level. Now, we have three words there: the professional, interpersonal and intrapersonal. Now, interpersonal meaning obviously you need interpersonal skills. With Mr. Shankly, and you probably see the same with Alex Ferguson, they had a certain persona about them. They were very calm, they were very confident, and they had a vision. They knew what they were going to do before they even started their coaching roles. They had this vision, it was very strong. But they were also very good leaders, and they were also very good interpersonal, on an interpersonal level people. They were not only disciplined at the right time, they made the right decisions at the right time, and they also knew how to build the self-esteem and confidence in players. So interpersonal skills is very important. But it's not only about getting the athlete to be a good athlete, it's also about improving the athlete. Now, I've been in coaching situations myself, and I'm a winning coach. If I was going to categorise myself as someone who, what type of coach I was. But at the same time, I was happy at the end of the day if I improved someone's skills, if I improved their competence, and you know, there's social connections involved with that, whatever sport you do, which a lot of people don't think about too much. The social connection is a very massive part of sport coaching, and that can be developed by the coach, which is something you might not think about, but it's important in a person's life. And it also builds your character as well. So these little things are more like a mental or social psychology aspect of coaching, but they're very important in respect to not only your sport, or not only the fact that you're being coached, but also these skills you can, and these character building exercises you can take into your own life. Okay, but quickly give you a summary of the 5 reasons I found why some coaches are ineffective, why they're not successful, why they end up having problems, why there's breakdowns in or conflict or emotional turmoil during the coaching type roles. And the studies have found that generally the 5 reasons, and one reason being it's an inability of certain coaches to change. Now, I think I can relate to that one. I've been in the same situation myself. We have our own ideas and our own philosophies of what we're going to be doing and what others need to do in respect to the coaching goals and objectives. But sometimes the coaches are not able to adjust to the culture of the sporting entity they're working with. So it ends up causing friction and tension because they're not giving in to the culture. They want to do everything the way they want to do it. And sometimes that lack of ability to change or to adjust can be the detriment of the coach staying in a position. Now there's another one, difficulty in measuring return of investment. I mean, how do you measure the return on investment if you invest in a coach for an athletics team or a cricket team or a young, junior team, whatever it might be? How do you measure the investment that you've given the coach, if you pay the coach or the time invested and that type of thing? It's sometimes very difficult to do. But that is one of the reasons that coaches often don't stay, because there might be a remuneration issue, or they might not be supported and they don't feel valued and that type of thing. So that's a bit of a hard one to also measure as well. Now the other reason is that often coaches don't have clarity. They don't have a clarity of purpose. What's the purpose of your coaching? Why are you actually coaching the team? This is an interesting question, because if you're really honest, if you're not coaching for the right reasons, you're probably not going to stay in the coaching role, or you're probably going to have lots of difficulties, because people pick up the vibes, they pick up the incompetencies, and they can be quite demeaning sometimes if you're not singing off the same song sheet, so to speak. So be aware of that one, because if you haven't got clarity of purpose, like you look at the coaches I mentioned earlier, Mr. Shankly, and you looked at Ferguson, Alex Ferguson, they had a purpose. They knew straight away when they first got their coaching roles what their vision was and what their purpose was. And it wasn't just to build a successful team, it was to build a successful club and a successful entity as a brand. So having clarity of your purpose and the reasons why you're coaching is very important. Now the other one is often a problem that surfaces is when is it the right fit for you? If you want to coach a young team, are you coaching it for the right reason? But is it the right fit for what your type of coach you are? Because your personality might not fit that particular role. I mean, I've seen many young coaches along the times when my own sons were playing football, and some of the coaches they were exposed to were just horrendous. I mean, it's like a person's become demented as soon as they take on this role, and they change into someone else. And I see it many times over the years, and it sometimes destroys young children and their particular, time they have with coaches to develop. So these can be quite damaging in some ways as well. So it's got to be the right fit. And the other one is the questionable expertise. Does the coach have the knowledge, skills and experience to be able to coach in that sport or that team or that group of people or that entity? Do they have the skills and experience to go with the coaching role? And I think that's often seen in professional sport more so, where you see now coaches at the highest level being sought out by multi-million-dollar entities because they've got the right fit, they've got the clarity of purpose, and they've got the expertise that people want. Okay, so they're just some little feelers for you to think about. So what's this actual book all about? I mean, it's important that you get a feel for what's coming up in the videos, because at the end of the day, you actually really want to get something from this book. And effective sport coaching is very important. If you're going to take a role as a coach, you want to be effective. Doesn't have to mean say you win everything, but it does mean if you've got a team of people and some people are learning from you and they're gaining new skills and character, the character's being built up over the time you've been with them, then you could class that as being successful. Okay, so the book's basically about sport coaching, obviously, but I want to run through 4 or 5 probably videos, but I'm going to look at 6 or 7 topics that I found in the research is very prominent, especially with the professional coaches. The coaches I mentioned earlier, Phil Jackson, and also Rick Charlesworth and Sir Alex Ferguson will be used all the way through this book, and I just touch on some of the things they recommend and some of their own experiences of what they learned as well. I spoke just before about having a purpose, a clarity of purpose, but you need to know that you need to have a philosophy of coaching. What's your philosophy? You're going to coach a team, what is your philosophy? And that means what is it's the way you think about your role, the way you think about your coaching. How are you going to approach your coaching? And the way you think dictates the way you coach. So if you're thinking something that's completely off the planet in regards to the coaching role you've got, you might have a problem with the people trying to take on board what your coaching philosophy is. And sport participants often can be confused by people who don't really have a clear purpose or a philosophy. They want to know what we're supposed to do ahead of time. Now, planning is important. Coaching is an art, so it's not just a skill you can pick up overnight. It takes time, and it takes time for developing that art. But you need to have a good bit of planning in your coaching. In my situation, I'm quite strong in planning because I've studied at university level in sport management and being a level 3 coach here in Australia for a few years. And I learned a lot about planning. And obviously, you plan your program for the year, you plan your coaching sessions, you plan your goals and objectives, all them types of things, all revolve around planning skills. And what Alex Ferguson said as well is that you need to plan because you need to adapt to change. And that's a very interesting comment, because changes do occur, especially in professional sport, each day and each moment even, and that's something you need to adapt to. And if you don't plan ahead, you can get caught out. Now, the other one was sport coaching communication. Now, good coaches, I think, should have good communication skills. It doesn't always mean you need to talk. I mean, it's quite interesting. I've been involved with some coaches who don't really speak in the half-time in a professional, semi-professional sport of football. I've been under coaches who don't actually speak during the half-time break. And it's very interesting because people are so pumped up with adrenaline. There's no real, you could argue the point that they're listening anyway. But sometimes it's better not to speak. And what Rick Charlesworth says, he says exactly that. Sometimes it's best to not say anything. Which I thought was quite an interesting comment. Plus, you need to know that all your athletes or your juniors or your youth development squad or your individual athletes all learn differently. Some people like to see things and see demonstrations, and some people like to listen. Some people like to see things written down, and there's different types of learners, so I'll run you through those learners as you get through the videos. Because once you've mastered this art of learning the learning styles of your people involved in your coaching, then you can go a long way to be very effective, because you've already taken the time to learn about that. Coaching involves conflict. It involves emotional conflict. We can't argue against that, because it's sport is especially the higher profile sports. It's basically an emotional, lot of emotional turmoil going on. So at some points in time there'll be pressure, there'll be stress, there'll be heartache, there'll be joy, there'll be happiness. But at the end of the day, you'll also have conflict, and conflict needs to be managed, because there's one thing you must learn is how to manage conflict, how to see it coming, how to diffuse it, and also how to deal with people in the most effective way. You don't want to be telling your individual athletes off or giving them a rundown in front of other people. There's ways to communicate it that are more effective to get the same message across. So it's important that you learn the learning styles, and it's also important that you are very sensitive to your participants and what their needs are, and you also then learn how to have emotional intelligence. In other words, refrain from showing your emotions too much, but also self-regulate your emotions as well. Now the next one is leadership style. Without leadership style and understanding what types of styles are effective and what types of styles are not, you could end up with lots of problems during your sport coaching. So I think it's very important to when I get to that video, you learn something from this one. Having been doing an MBA in leadership, I learned quite a lot about the styles, and I think even in workplaces and sport and other business-to-business type interactions, your style of management, your style of coaching, your style of leadership is critical for others, not only to listen but also take on board what you're doing. And when anything revolves around leadership, there's only one word that matters. And you probably got your own experience in your own sport from whatever sport you've played or been involved in. The big word is called trust. Because if there's no trust, it's very difficult to portray leadership. And if people are not trusting you, then you've got a very uphill battle to try and become effective as a sport coach. So I'll run you through some of them styles and run you through some of the things you can take on board for yourself. Stress prevention. Sport coaching can be very stressful. I coached young juniors for a few years, many years, and even though it's supposed to be enjoyable, it also became very stressful. And lots of problems with, the ugly parent syndrome. And I've got a few legal cases in the following videos which you'll be alarmed about, because some of these instances in these junior sports situations ended up becoming, horrifically everything going wrong. And that's because everyone's emotionally charged and the stress becomes part of the big picture. But you need to know how to stop that and how to stop the build-up of stress and how to deal with it and how to diffuse it. Because if you can build up resilience to stress and know what it is and what's happening to you, then you're also in a more calmer state of mind to be able to make decisions and make the right decisions. Now I close off the book with sport coaching laws, because the legal side of coaching is something you really do need to know, because it is quite serious if something goes wrong, especially if it's you need to know you have a duty of care to your participants and a duty of care to others that are involved in the sport that you're in. So coaching, has become a bit more legally bound with the professional, especially in the professional levels where there's high amounts of money to be earned. And we've got issues of brand, we've got issues of the ethical behaviour of sport coaches as well, and how they need to behave and show ethics to their participants. So there's certain practices that need to be understood and developed and also passed on and practiced. So I'll go through that duty of care, the ethics and sports laws, because I've studied sport law at university level, so that's also a big eye-opener for me, because there's plenty of legal cases out there where things have gone horrifically wrong. One coach, for instance, I was coaching a kickboxing tournament, and the coach was looking after his own person who was involved in a kickboxing game match, and things went horribly wrong in the ring, and the person was basically dumped by the other kickboxer, and he landed on the back of his neck and his head and basically paralysed him to the point where it went very nasty in the courts. From a legal point of view, who was owed compensation for that. So things ended up about $4 million, which is something you really do need to be careful of when you're a coach. So I'll run you through some of them issues as well, and some of the things you can do to stop that happening to yourself. So great, so all in all, welcome to my new book and my new video, Sports Coaching, Effective Sports Coaching Steps to Success. And I hope you can join me through the next videos, and I look forward to your viewing, and hopefully you'll learn something from this. Thank you.